Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Novelists Unwind. I'm Johnnie Alexander, and I'm really excited today to be here with Valerie Fraser Luesse. Her last name is spelled Luesse. In case you're wanting to look her up, you can find it, but it's pronounced Luesse. And she is the award-winning author of a couple books. She's got Missing Isaac, and then soon to come out is her newest book, Almost Home. I think by the time the recording's up and live, though, it's already going to be on the shelf, so you'll be able to get a hold of it. And we're going to talk about those two books. Valerie, I'm so excited to have you with us because you certainly seem to have found your niche writing historical books, and they are very rooted in Southern history and where you live. So tell us a little bit about your writing journey with Southern Living magazine and in your home.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for having me. This is
I'm delighted.
The thing is, I grew up in rural Alabama in the 60s and 70s. And so we had, of course, no cell phone, no internet. We graduated from an 8-party line to a 2-party line with the rotary phone attached to the wall. And so when you have like 3 TV stations, you have to entertain yourself.
Absolutely.
Somehow. And with my family, it was storytelling. We lived with my grandmother till I was, I guess, about, 12 or so. And then my parents, she deeded them some land and they built a house across the highway from her. But so I was always, when I was young, living in this house that was the center for this big extended family. My mother's the youngest of 8 kids.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so everybody came home. My grandmother's nickname was the Colonel. And when she said, everybody come home, everybody came home. And storytelling was just a big part of what we did. We ate and we talked, and which is a Southern thing.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just sort of grew up hearing that oral history. It was just, in the DNA. And wasn't really thinking of it as anything I would do something with when I was very young. It was just entertaining.
Sure.
And I kick myself daily for not writing all those stories down.
I know.
But then I got serious about it, later, and I realized, I just thought, this is really interesting. And then many years later, when I got married, my husband's from the Midwest, and when I would tell him some of these stories, he said, you should write this down. And I said, well, everybody thinks their family's interesting. And he would go, yeah, but yours.
Yours really is.
So anyway, I always loved storytelling. I always loved the South. Southern Living was my dream job. I started there working for their parent company in corporate communications. I was more promoting Southern Living than writing for it. I started there in '88.
Wow.
And then I sort of graduated to helping develop new magazines. I happened to be there when a lot of the founders of Southern Living were still there, and that is one of the greatest blessings of my life because I was able to learn from them. Some wonderful writers. Diane Young was my mentor, just a wonderful, wonderful writer. Gary Ford, Les Thomas, people who had been on the road and been traveling for decades, and they would, if you didn't get on their nerves and you worked really hard, they would take you under wing. And they absolutely did that with me. And so after about 10 or 11 years with the company, I moved over to Southern Living Edit and got to, travel all over the South and tell wonderful stories. And that was great training for fiction because they, with a magazine, you're always looking for that quote, that pull quote. And so it teaches you to listen, not just to what people say, but are they saying it in an interesting way? And so that was just, great training ground for books. And I left to freelance for a few years during the recession. The recession was not kind to the magazine business.
No.
Yeah, it was tough. And so, but then Southern Living was about to celebrate their 50th anniversary, and the editor-in-chief invited me to come back. And it started with working on their anniversary book. And then he said, well, why don't you help us with the anniversary issue of the magazine? And then the next thing I knew, somebody just put my name on a door, and they said, guess what, you're back. So I'm the senior travel editor there, and I say senior in every sense of the word because I'm much older than many of my colleagues. But it's been fun. When I was there the first time, there were a lot of people older than me and more experienced, and now the staff is very young and energetic, and so we learn from each other. They teach me all things digital, and I can usually pull out of memory, if we're trying something that Southern Living's done in the past, I can usually remember, how that went. So it's been nice and in a completely different way to come back and get to work with this young staff. So that's sort of my career in magazines. The book writing started during the recession. Things were just really tense and difficult and stressful, and I wasn't sleeping very well. And once I had seen every rerun of Law and Order ever made, because that's all that was on television at 3:00 in the morning, I was wide awake thinking, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? I was just said, there must be something. If I'm not going to sleep, I'm going to do something productive. And so I dusted off a short story that I had started in college.
Oh, and, wow.
Yeah, it had been swimming around up there for a long time. And just opened up my little secretary desk and lit a candle. My cat came in there with me. My husband snoring a couple of doors down. And I just wrote. I wasn't thinking about publishing or genres or anything. I just started with those characters and let that story go wherever it wanted to. Because magazines had gotten very structured back then. It felt very formulaic to me. It wasn't really fun anymore. It's fun again, I'm happy to say.
Oh, good.
It's great fun now. But it was just going through a really bad time. And so I just needed an outlet. I needed something to look forward to. And the next thing I knew, I had chapters, and then I had chapters. And I thought, well, maybe I need a sounding board. So I called up my buddy, Tanner Latham, who's a wonderful multimedia storyteller. We had worked together at Southern Living. He's much younger than I am, but he was able, when we worked together, to, if I was struggling with the story, he could read it and tell me why I was getting tripped up. And he wouldn't try to change what I was trying to do. He would just go, you're doing this. And so he was freelancing then, and I asked him if he would be my freelance editor. And so that was so much fun, because I would mail him 3 or 4 chapters, and then we would meet at this cafeteria called the Paw Paw Patch on Green Springs Highway in Birmingham. We would order fried green tomatoes and sit at a booth and talk about my character.
You can't get more Southern than that. Fried green tomatoes at Paw Paw Patch.
Fried green tomatoes at Paw Paw Patch. And so we just had the best time talking about the story. And I had no idea how much that I had to learn, because I didn't understand a lot of technical stuff. I mean, I studied English Lit in college. Both of my degrees are in English. And I thought, I've read enough, surely. But there's a lot of technical stuff that you kind of have to master that I was absolutely clueless about.
I think that's true for a lot of us. I mean, because we do, as writers, we read a lot, so we think we get it, and yet then when we start doing it ourselves, it's like point of view, head hopping.
I thought that I was writing in third person, omniscient observer. And my editors at Revell said, no, you're just changing point of view every paragraph. So I wanted to get in everybody's head.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my goodness, that's funny.
So yeah, I learned point of view. But one thing that I probably won't ever change much is that I like to just let it go. I've never been able to write from an outline. In college, when you had to turn in an outline with your paper, write the paper first and then retrofit an outline
into the outline.
I can't do it, and it would be so much. I don't recommend my way because I do a lot of backtracking, but there's something about trying to ABC it going in that just feels confining. And so I just kind of let it go where it wants to, and then worry about, bat and clean up later. And so in one of those sessions with Tanner, in Missing Isaac, most of the characters when I first started, most of the adult characters were just background. They weren't intended to be a part of the story initially, but then they just started talking and they became interesting and they started interacting with each other. And I would be like, who knew? And Tanner was like, you realize on some level you're making this happen, don't you?
Yeah.
But he would tell me, this guy in chapter 3 is a different person in chapter 8. You might want to look into that. So, but that was part of the fun. It was, one of the characters who was initially not appealing at all became one of my favorites. So
Wow.
Yeah, and that's the fun of it to me, is just seeing.
Me too. I like it when the characters do things I don't expect them to do, or they surprise me. And like, your friend said, yeah, at some level you're doing it, but it just seems like, no, they are doing these things, and it wasn't my idea.
I know. I don't. It doesn't feel intentional.
No, it doesn't. I
know it must be, but a magazine story is very architectural and intentional. You gather your facts, organize them, you think about the main point of the story. To me, it's very architectural. Fiction writing doesn't feel that way at all. I just go off on a big old ramble.
That's so interesting. I mean, it's so interesting that that you were sort of trained over quite a while in this way, but yet when you get into the fiction, it's just this whole different, wide open experience. That's cool.
And I feel like a friend of mine and I were talking, and I said, I finally realized that I think you write magazine stories from the outside looking in, and you write fiction from inside the character looking out.
Yeah, I like that.
So, with magazines, you observe, you explore, you go to a place, you interview people. You're absolutely on the outside observing. And then you find a way to put it all together so readers can understand it. But with fiction, you have to climb into that character and see their world, or you can't talk for them. And dialogue it's now my favorite thing. I was horrified. I attempted it first, and the first 30 pages of the book were all in retrospect. It was, and then my dad read it, and he said, "Oh, I love your book. Not much happens till page 30, does it?"
That's why we have editors, though, and friends and critique partners and things like that. So.
Well, I guess somebody's going to have to speak eventually.
Yeah, but you got to get. I think sometimes we do that, though, just especially when we're writing seat of the pants and just going like that, because you've got all these ideas and you kind of got to get them out, and it's okay because it's the draft. And I start. Like my latest one, this is so silly. I wrote discovery draft on the top of it in case. I can't believe I'm going to say this. In case I would die and someone would see it, it's so awful. It's like I wanted people to know, okay, this is the discovery draft.
I love that. I'm going to use that.
And that gives me freedom then to just sort of, I don't know, just to kind of mess up, and it's okay.
Yeah.
I
think that's very true. Discovery draft. I'm going to definitely use that from now on.
Yeah. Okay.
You have to remind yourself sometimes, nobody's going to see this until I say
exactly. And it's
so tripped up.
Okay. Well, real quick, because I don't want to keep you too long, but for those watching, before we got started, Valerie showed me her story shack, and I just love it. She was telling me about it. So I'm going to ask her to tell again what she told me when we weren't recording. She's got this little story shack that she writes in, and I am so jealous.
Well, I'll pan.
Great.
The front of the shack, and it has a glass door and a picture window and a little bitty porch outside, and I like Christmas lights, so I have them strung over the window year round. I don't know if I'll be able to show you. Let me see. It's just a little front and back. There's a front door and a back door. And my bookcase over here with lots of mementos and favorite books and things like that.
I love it.
And And on the outside, which you can't see, I'm very sentimental, and I just wanted everything on the Story Shack to kind of mean something. And so I had the screen door off my grandmother's old house that was going to be torn down. And of course,
Oh,
the screen was out. And so I took just the door and painted it bright blue. This Story Shack is chocolate brown on the outside, and it looks kind of like rough wood on the inside. And I had my husband nailed the screen door to the side of the Story Shack, and then he built me a little step to go under it. And then I have these little metal flowers on the sides of it.
I'm gonna cry.
And I have a piece of her old tin roof that my husband and some reclaimed wood. He made a little art piece for me. But this fella that built the shack for us, he's a good friend named Don, and Don is a no-nonsense Southern man. And when I asked him, he actually hung the screen door for me to put this door on a wall. He said, sure enough, everything I asked him to do that I thought was really Southern, he'd go, sure enough, you want me to do that? And he'd say, Val, don't you forget and try to go in this door now, because it don't go anywhere. But I don't know if you can, I'll see if I can tilt it up. It won't go up.
Oh my goodness. I know. And I'm like going like this, like that's going to help.
The shelf up at the top, and I've got little things up there that I love. And the ceiling is painted what Southerners call Hank blue. I don't know if you ever heard of that.
No.
But it's an old folklore tradition where you paint the ceiling of your porch blue, it's kind of a robin's egg shade of blue. And, some people say it's to keep the Hanks away, the bad spirits away. I think it's also supposed to keep like some kind of bugs or pests or something.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
But it's called Hank blue. And I have a little bottle tree. That's also an old Southern folklore thing. If you've ever seen bottle trees,
yes,
a miniature one. And I have an old apple basket. My grandfather delivered apples to poor families during the Depression. That was part of a good job, I think, that he had. He would deliver those. And so I have one of the old apple baskets in here, and I'm an old person.
Oh, no, I love it. I just love that you're honoring your family legacy and your heritage in the Story Shack, because I just love that name. That's precious.
Initially, when we were trying to decide what to build, I wanted an actual shed. I said, I think I just want a shed to ride in. And my husband said, well, I think it's going to get cold, and then I think it's going to get hot, and I think you're going to be really uncomfortable if I build you a shed, So he said, what if I do something a little nicer? And then that's when we found this little cottage in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, and built the shack.
I love it. Love it. Such a sweet, sweet story, and very unusual. So I love it. I love it. Well, talking, because we don't have a lot of time, but really quick, we want to talk about your latest book, Almost Home, that will be out by the time this records. As I was looking through the press material, I was just amazed by the huge cast of characters that you have in that story, because there's a boarding house, and so you have all these different people coming to this boarding house to stay, and then there's a mystery from 100 years ago that has to do with the boarding house too. So you've got this huge cast of characters. And then I love this. You said that you were inspired by a Grimm's fairy tale, The 12 Dancing Princesses. And I was like, I know that story. It was one that I read over and over again when I was a child. I mean, it was one of my favorite Grimm's fairy tales. So I looked it up on Wikipedia to make sure I knew the story again. So I was like, yep, that's exactly the one. Okay, so we've got World War II, right? We're sort of in World War II. We've got the Grimm's fairy tale, The 12 Dancing Princesses, a boarding house, a river pirate.
It happens. It happens. A pirate is just going to wander into your story every now and then. All of that it's a lot of stuff coming together. I hope it comes together in a good way.
I'm intrigued. I really am. I just like, wow.
Well, a lot of it's true. I mean, the setting of the book is real. My grandmother grew up in the house that inspired me, and her brother
Oh, wow.
inherited it. And he really did build a man-made lake and a skating rink right across the road from their
Oh,
big
my
old southern house. And they really did take in boarders during World War II. So all of that was coming from my family's oral history, just the
God.
setting. All the characters are fictitious and all the plot and everything. But the whole idea of this big old house taking in people from all over the country, and they don't know each other, and yet now here they are living together. Um, and my family was very affected by the war, as you know, everybody's family was back then. I actually got into sort of researching, especially the war in the Pacific, because my mother's older brother served on Okinawa, and he never talked about it.
Yeah.
He never would discuss his war experience. And his brother, another uncle of mine, told me that when he came home from the war, he just stayed home at his parents' house for a couple of years and installed indoor plumbing for his mother, so she would have indoor plumbing in her house, and just kind of settled his mind. And so I wanted to bring this young veteran, Reed Ingram. In the story, he had lived in this neighborhood as a child, and then his family moved away, and he was just never happy really anywhere except here. And so when he comes home from the war and he's wounded in every way, and he just can't get back, he can't be the person that his family wants him to be, because he just can't. And so he needs to find a place to heal, and he decides that he'll come back to his old community called Blackberry Springs, Alabama, and see if he can find his way home from the war. And so that's kind of where Almost Home. And of course, he meets a young woman who's a war widow. The book is dedicated to my friend Missy, who I lost when we were 32 to cancer. And so I took everything I loved about Missy and poured it into Daisy Dupree.
Yeah.
So Daisy's life doesn't have anything to do with Missy's. I wouldn't invade her privacy that way, but her qualities, the things that make her endearing and interesting, I pulled out her sense of humor, especially. I pulled that from Missy, and Missy was an artist, so I made Daisy an artist. And so a lot of it is sort of grounded in truth, but what I was just trying to get at is how strangers can become a loving community, a family in difficult times. And the people that Dolly Chandler, who owns the house, she and her husband Si, the people that they host and bring together, just become a family of strangers, essentially. And yeah, there is that business of the river pirate, because I love Mississippi, and I'm reading this history about Mississippi river pirates, and I said, I've got to get that in this story somehow. And it gave me the opportunity to write through the journal of the river pirates, love, a little bit of a more classic romance kind of novel, because I don't really write what I think of as romance novels, but it gave me a chance to have some fun with that through her diaries. So.
Well, this has been so great. I really enjoyed talking with you. It's just
Same here.
Fun. One last question. When you're all done with writing your stories, you get to that end, what do you do to unwind?
I don't need to unwind from the story. I have to unwind from events, because I'm such an introvert.
Exactly what you need.
So when I'm writing, I'm good, but when I have to do a signing or a author appearance or something, I have to kind of just come home, watch a little TV and a little Netflix or something, because that's not in my nature to do that. But I'm so grateful that people invite me, and I appreciate it. But it makes me a little nervous. So as long as I'm writing, I'm good.
Fine.
That's the fun part to me.
Oh, that's great. Well, Valerie, thank you again so much. This has been a lot of fun, and thanks for sharing, a little bit of your family history and your story shack. And
call me tomorrow, even if I'm not on your show. We'll just talk.
We will. We definitely will. Because this has been fun. Thank you so much. And thanks to everybody for watching. We're really glad you're with us. And, come back again for another episode of Novelists Unwind. Bye-bye.
Bye.